So here's it's actually a finite element grid put over a salt dome from the Gulf of Mexico. A number of wells are shown. These are real wells that have been drilled in the vicinity. And a lot of oil is produced from sediments that are trapped up against salt. Sometimes we drill through salt to reach oil and gas reservoirs. So it's important to remember that what I've just said about the stress being vertical and horizontal is not true around salt, because salt creeps. Salt is extremely weak. Salt can support no shear stress over geologic time. So the interface between the salt and the rock becomes a free surface, right? The salt can support no shear. And therefore, the stresses must be parallel and perpendicular to that surface that has no shear stress, the way, you know, the contact between the Earth's surface and the air, or the sea bottom and the sea, is a free surface. The boundary between the salt and the rock is also a free surface that is going to reorient the stress field. And so here are some examples, and they actually show real wells. So in this case, the salt body is kind of a unusual lens of salt, which is mapped seismically to be something like that. What we see here is a well that was drilled through that salt to reach some target over here, okay? And so it is important to keep in mind that that salt body is reorienting the stress field such that you know, the state of stress here, the principal stresses are going to be parallel to that salt body, right? And not horizontal and vertical as they might be over here, where we're not influenced by the salt body. Here's another case in the lower diagram. This is a salt diapir that is, you know, something like this. What we see are the sedimentary rocks deformed up against the salt, and obviously the wells are drilling into those structures, which are obviously you know, filled with hydrocarbon and trapped against the fault. And again, the orientation of the salt body is going to locally reorient the stresses. Here's a case in which the target for the oil is below a salt overhang, and so the salt body here is fairly horizontal, excuse me, but has this overhang like this, and this state of stress right there is going to be severely affected by the geometry. So our ability to describe the stress field is going to be closely tied to our ability to use advanced seismic imaging techniques and actually image the exact shape of the salt. And then what we can do is either go into a quantitative model. That's what's going on here. This finite element model was developed, in fact, to take the stress field where it's unperturbed by the salt, and then see how the salt modifies the local stress field. And we can build such models and predict the stress field. Why? Because obviously it's going to be a challenge to reach these sediments, and the problem you may face is, you know, what the stress conditions are going to be as you're exiting salt, right? And so you want to get that as accurately as you can. And from a wellbore stability point of view, if that turned out, let's just say you went through a series of calculations, the kind of things we'll talk about in chapter 10, and you propose to drill this well, and yet you see that this, you know, whether or not you're going to successfully get through the salt at that position, one might then consider, well, while it might cost a little bit more money, it's going to be a lot easier maybe to drill with that trajectory. So keeping these things in mind and dealing with these problems quantitatively is very important in some applications. And this is an example from the book in which we're just sort of intuitively thinking about how the stress trajectories, which, you know, over here are vertical and horizontal, but the well path here is very, very, not through the salt, but very, very close to the salt to reach some target down here, that well path is going to go through areas where the stress field is affected by the salt body. Okay? So in general, the stresses are horizontal and vertical. In special cases, in cases which are quite
Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde. Boa tarde, gente. Boa tarde.
Today's lecture is going to be on Chapter 1, the tectonic stress field. Some of the things that we discuss you've already seen in yesterday's, in the first lecture, but there'll be some new ideas and concepts that we'll have a chance to develop more fully. The lecture is going to be in 3 sections. The first section to discuss basic definitions of stress, to go through Anderson's stress classification system in some more detail, and to show kind of a place where all our normal rules break down, and that is the stress field near salt domes. And the reasons for this will be clear in a moment. We'll talk about stress magnitudes in a little bit, the information you need to do homework 1 on calculating the vertical stress, and then we'll revisit some of the questions